Hello and welcome to Cafe New Canadians. Today we've gathered here to talk about diversifying your personal network for professional growth. Very soon we'll be joined by Brent Edwards, a professional networking advisor. And this special virtual webinar series is Cafe New Canadians, which is brought to you by New Canadians TV. New Canadians is a web and TV show which is focused on newcomers in Canada. And we bring you practical advice on navigating your career, job, life, and all of that and lots more in Canada. Today, we're going to talk about networking, and I'm your host, Vasudha Sharma. And I'm very pleased to welcome our expert this evening, Brent Edwards, professional networking advisor. Brent, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Vasudha. It's great to be with you again.
And once again, our topic today is diversify your personal network for professional growth. And as we go through this virtual chat, please feel free to send in your questions to us. You can type in on the Q&A tab on Zoom. This chat is also being live streamed on YouTube, so feel free to type in your questions there and we'll have Brent answer them for you. Now, the extreme volatility that we've seen in the past few weeks, that has put a spotlight into the whole issue of job uncertainties, unemployment. A lot of people are going through that. And according to Brent, it's very important to expand your professional network beyond your company, beyond your industry, your sector also. It's a critical step in these dynamic times. Brent, we'll come to you now. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you keeping up? How are you keeping your spirits up these days?
I'm doing well. It's been difficult for everyone with COVID-19. A lot of us are working from home. It's been about 10 years since I actually worked from home, but getting back into the spirit with it. I think this is a time for us all to pull together. We do have something in common, and we're all battling against this virus. And in some ways, maybe when this is all over, we'll actually find that we have actually something else in common that will help us build better relationships going forward. So even though it's a bit scary now, I'm optimistic in terms of what this will do for our society as a whole.
Absolutely, we're all in it together and we'll all emerge stronger from it. Brent, you've talked about the importance of diversifying your network. We spend so much time nurturing and maintaining our network, but according to you, the process should never stop. Why so?
You really need to invest in this as a process. As Vasudha and I, when we've had some of our previous discussions, we've pointed out that networking really is not transactional. It's where you're building a relationship. There's a famous networking expert from the United States, Dr. Ivan Misner, who actually started BNI, and he likens networking to farming as opposed to hunting. So you really need to go out in the field. You need to till the soil. You need to grow your plants, and it's something that you're doing all the time. When times are good, you may not see as many benefits, but when you look at what's happened to the world in the last 2 weeks, this is the time where you really need to have a broad network. If I take another analogy, it would be if you look at your investment portfolio. If you wanted to build a balanced portfolio, you'd want to have a mixture of stocks and bonds and T-bills, money market funds. You'd probably want some cash in there. You might have some stocks, and look at your portfolio. What I'd advise you to do is look at your portfolio the same way. If you had put all of your contacts into one industry over the past 2 weeks, maybe it was like the beach stocks, which is beach or booking, entertainment, airlines, cruises, and hotels, then your stock definitely would have decreased in value. So really what you want to do is look at your portfolio and your network as a balanced portfolio. You want to have a balance of people from different industries. Yes, you want to have your own contacts and your personal relationships and your friends and business colleagues, but you really want to broaden that. You want to look at people from other industries, other sectors, because you never know where your career will take you. You may have, great plans in terms of it's going to be a straightforward road, but in many cases it's going to take you on trips and side roads that you don't anticipate. So really look at balancing out your portfolio of who you have relationships with.
Right. So you just explained that, your career path is no longer a straight line. It's going to be like a curvy, twisty road.
Yes.
So now that you've explained the importance of broadening your network, how do our viewers go about doing so?
Sure. So let's take a look at, let's use that as an analogy. I love maps and history and geography. If you were to look at the map of Canada, for those of you who may be fairly new to the country, we have the TransCanada Highway, which runs all the way from St. John's in Newfoundland and Labrador all the way to Victoria on Vancouver Island. If you were to drive from coast to coast, there's actually a limited number of roads that you can take to make that trip. There's a few extra roads that you could take across the provinces, but really it is the TransCanada Highway which binds the country together. What I would suggest people do in terms of their career options is not necessarily look at the TransCanada Highway as one way to have your path, but really look at the US interstate highway system more as where your options are. So if you were to drive from Los Angeles to New York City, there's probably about a dozen different highways, north, south, east, west, interstate highways that you could take to get to your destination. And that's also in terms of building out your career and who your contacts are. There's some advice that I've heard where people will say, what you really want to do is reach out to your friends and your family and your colleagues, and they're there for you. And absolutely, I mean, they're there to support you. They probably know you better than almost anyone else. There is something though to keep in mind, and I'll give you a personal example. I worked in the financial services and the banking industry for many years. Decided that I wanted to actually take a change and move into another field. I wanted to move into market research. But what happened was I had my friends and my colleagues kept coming back to me and say, "Hey, Brent, guess what? I was on Indeed and I saw this great job opportunity for you. And it was with a bank and it was marketing credit cards. And that really was not what I wanted to do anymore. I felt I'd given as much as I could." So if you are relying on people who you're used to working with, they will actually probably make some recommendations that might actually reduce some options for you. So you really want to start connecting with people in some of the industries and the sectors that you might want to move into. And what I would even suggest is that you may have a few different sectors in mind, but look at other different options and other different connections that you may never have thought of. To give you an example, if you were to go into your LinkedIn profile, you'd see that there's actually a lot of people who have entrepreneurship. They have started their own business. They may not be on the same career path as you, but you never know who they actually know. I've actually connected through LinkedIn, which is a terrific platform, with a number of people who in Australia, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, who also help newcomers with their career search. They also run networking events, and they have a really interesting and different perspective than potentially ourselves in Canada. So
Right.
I would really encourage people to look at a broader network of people to connect with.
Now that we've been live streaming for a few minutes, let's just quickly poll our audiences. We'd love to know what the demographic of our audience today is. We want to know how long they've been in Canada, which industry they're in, and what's the purpose. What purpose are they seeking when it comes to job seeking today? So we'd like to know from our audience, how long have you been in Canada? Has it been less than 6 months, less than 2 years, or more than 2 years? Please type in your answers and we'll take up your questions in just a bit. Okay, so Brent, a lot of people are going to get added to the job market today as a lot of small businesses won't be able to sustain. A lot of companies would be laying off because of budget cuts. A lot of people talk about taking up new skills, taking up new courses. Networking is also another way to navigate out of these challenging times, would you say?
Absolutely. Networking is really, it's so ingrained within the Canadian business culture that it's almost second nature to a lot of people who are established Canadians. Uh, there are so many different networking opportunities across Canada. So in any community that you're in, whether you're going to a Toastmasters club or to a LinkedIn local event, whether you're going to a local Board of Trade or Chamber of Commerce event, there are so many. And even you may say, well, Brent, in the last 2 weeks, all those in-person events have been canceled. Well, what I've actually noticed is a tremendous number of those events have actually gone online and they've gone digital. I've actually been a bit shocked by the number of providers of in-person networking events that have gone to digital platforms. If you take a look at some examples, so you may have a technology meetup in your community. I know there's ones in Vancouver and Montreal and some of the other major cities in Calgary. In Toronto, we have one called Tech TO. They normally have about 700 participants come out to their events down by the waterfront the first Monday of each month. This month, they did have their in-person meeting, but they decided this past Monday to actually go online. And normally they charge a small amount of money to attend, about $25 or so. However, this past Monday, they actually had 1,600 participants for the event. They did not charge for joining. And I actually met up with people from Calgary and Vancouver who had joined the event. So even though you think that some of the networking events are closing up and they're not being available in person, you'd actually be surprised by the number of in-person online events that have been created. And I've actually been amazed by the amount of ways that they can promote interaction. There are networking components to them. There are expo components. There's ways of breaking into different sessions. So there's a lot of ways that you can still continue building a relationship online through these new platforms that are available.
It's amazing. We're seeing the sense of social solidarity in the job market as everybody's pitching in and offering their services. So the poll we just conducted was how long have you been in Canada? And the results have come in. 56% of our audience says that they've been in Canada for over 2 years. Yeah. 44% of our audience has been in Canada less than 2 years. So I believe, Brent, no matter how long you've been in Canada, given current circumstances, anybody could be facing job uncertainty because the market is just so volatile, business is down. If you're a newcomer or been in the industry, is this a good time to maybe pivot your career and maybe go on to that career path that you've always dreamt about?
Yeah, there's actually there's a famous quote from Rahm Emanuel, who was Barack Obama's chief of staff, who talked about don't let a good crisis go to waste. And he wasn't talking about the tragedy that we're facing with COVID-19 and the heroic efforts that are being made by our frontline healthcare workers and people within the retail industry and people who are doing their best to service people. What he was also really talking about was it's an opportunity for you to try things that are different that you've never tried before. So you may be in a situation where you may have had an established career within a certain industry, but this really is the chance for you to try out something new. So if you haven't been actively networking, if you haven't been part of a professional immigrant network group, that the PINs are doing amazing work. If you haven't taken a bridging program, if you haven't considered actually signing up for additional schooling, there's a lot of opportunities available. And even though we're being forced into the situation and making sure that we're staying socially isolated and staying at least 6 feet away from other people to really put an end to this virus, there are a lot of opportunities for you to take a step. if I was to provide some advice on that, this was given to me a few years ago by an outplacement counselor, because I've been through that. Unfortunately, I've been through this process before. They really likened it to a highway. So again, I love metaphors, so it's another highway example. It's really what kind of change you're looking to make. So if you're in an existing field and an existing role, and you decide that you're going to say keep the same role, let's say you're in business development and you're in the travel industry, but you decide that you want to move, and you want to move, say, into the distribution or the supply chain industry. So if you're making a move and you're keeping basically the same type of role, but you're moving over to a different industry or different sector, that's really like changing one lane on the highway. So that works. Let's say that you are in the field and you're in, say, supply chain, and you're in business development, but you want to move into a more marketing oriented role. Again, that's really moving one lane over. So you're staying in the same industry or the same sector, but you're changing role. Where it can get a bit a little more dangerous on the highway is if you're deciding to change both your field and your industry or sector at the same time. If you're working with outplacement consultants, if you're working with recruiters, if you're working with even internal recruiters within companies, it's almost like changing two lanes at once. And that can be a little bit harder for people who are not close to you to understand what your motivation is, and to understand if you actually would be able to fit into a new role. So if you look at the options available to people, one is to change field, one is to change industry or sector, one is to change both, and we've talked about some of the downsides of trying that. And the fourth option is to go into your own business, whether you're going in with a partner or sole entrepreneurship. I'd actually, in the networking world, there's a whole world of networking that is going on that is probably invisible to people who are using networking only for career advancement. There are so many different business networking groups that are happening every week.
Right.
There is really organized opportunities, and those people are also willing to share their expertise in terms of building relationships, because some of them are absolutely amazing at quickly building credibility and trust with people they've just met.
Okay. Brent, let's also quickly take in another survey. Now that you talked about the various gains you get out of networking, let's ask our audience today, what is your primary purpose for networking? What would you like to know from Brent? Are you looking to find your first job in Canada? Are you looking to find another job? Are you looking to advance your career? Are you exploring other alternative career options or other reasons? Let's give our audience a few minutes to punch in their answers. It's amazing to know that there's so many things you could do from networking. One would only think about the career and the job aspect. But of course, changing your career path, as Brent just mentioned, getting into business, getting into entrepreneurship. Excellent insight there.
Thanks. I've learned it from a personal experience.
Personal experience. Brent, just give us some insight into your background and the kind of expertise you bring to the table.
Yeah, so I've actually I'm not a newcomer to Canada. I mean, it's considered to be an established Canadian, but I actually grew up on the West Coast. So my background today is my poster from the 2010 Winter Olympics, which was a great event that we attended. I moved to Toronto, well, it's been over 3 decades ago, moved into business development, even though what I studied in university was marketing. And after working in B2B business development for about 6 years, I actually transitioned into a marketing role. And I had various marketing, product management, product development roles for about 20 years. And also then moved into an area where I was in new product development in consumer banking. After being in business to business financial services, I spent time in new product development in market research, global market research company, again, business to business side. And for the last couple of years, I've worked with the Chamber of Commerce. So I've worked with a lot of different industries and a lot of different sectors. And I guess I've learned how these sectors actually work together and how much actually similarity they are within certain industries where people who may have spent their entire career in the industry may not have seen some of the connections in other business areas. But that's business of business has always been an area that's fascinated me.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Brent. And the results of our last poll are in. We asked our audience, what is your primary purpose of networking? And 89% of them answered to advance my career, and 44% answered to explore alternative career options. That's great to know. Now that we went through all of that you can do from networking, we've received a question on YouTube. Arjun wants to know, what approach would you suggest if you need to move cities within Canada? Can networking come to help?
Absolutely. And that's something I had to do myself. And again, I'm going to be dating myself in terms of my age. But I actually had, when I finished university, there was actually a financial crash about 2 months after I finished my degree. Nothing as severe as what we're going through right now, but it was a bit difficult. I spent about 6 months or so working in more of a sales job on commission, but to actually decide to move to Toronto. I was using newspapers back then. I was actually going door to door and writing down the names of businesses and using directories from the public library to find it. Networking is a way for sure if you're looking to move across Canada. So whether you're moving from Halifax or Vancouver or Northern Ontario, you really want to build up some relationships because you're looking again to build trust and credibility with people who can vouch for you and can speak to your expertise. And that expertise they may not necessarily have worked with you directly, but it could be volunteer work. It could be work on the side that you've been able to do to support people. It could be friendships that you've made. So I would absolutely start looking at building relationships and starting to join online events. So this is one where it's a disadvantage that you can't actually attend in person, but because so many of these networking events have now gone online, they're pretty much open to anyone. And I would really encourage you to look at some of the professional associations, trade associations. They, again, have great events. Usually you would have to pay to attend the event in person, but if you're actually out of town, you're in another province, there may be an opportunity for you to actually start to connect with people who normally you'd actually have to hop on a plane to go and see them. So this is actually probably a good time to do it. But we know that you're supposed to stay home, don't leave your house, wash your hands, don't touch your face, all the good advice we're giving. So go online, find out about these events, and start building some relationships.
Okay, Brent, now let's go through some tactical tips. Help our viewers design their networking strategy. What are your recommendations?
Sure, I'm going to share a few slides with the group. And this might help with some of our discussion. So just a quick summary of why is networking important. We talked about the career progression being through really informal means, and your career path is not likely to be linear, especially these days. So in terms of some of the strategies and tactics that I would normally ask people about, these are some of the basics that I would expect people to consider. So optimizing your LinkedIn profile, you'll have heard that from many people. The LinkedIn profile is really the way that most Canadians are sharing and connecting today. Yes, there are some other platforms available, but in reality, if you're not on LinkedIn, if you don't have a professional LinkedIn profile, in some ways, in the view of recruiters and potential companies hiring, you're not there. You don't exist. Consider attending an online professional networking event, posting events on Twitter. So make sure you get a Twitter account if you don't have one up to now. Posting articles on LinkedIn. It's again a good way to raise your visibility because you want to be seen as an expert in your field. Informational interviews are always great. The virtual coffees that we talk about, spending half an hour to speak to someone who is in a field that you want to be in or an industry that you want to be part of. It's amazing how helpful people can actually be, and many of them are. But really what they want you to do is you need to be able to articulate how you need help. We talked about bridging programs, working with a mentor, attending a meetup, registering for a professional development course, or some other ways to do this. And I would mention that just a nod to our sponsor and our broadcaster, New Canadians TV, is an excellent resource for any of this information. There are videos or TV show on Omni TV. There's all kinds of resources available at newcanadians.tv. Considering your career objective, we talked about what the different options were in terms of changing lanes. Something also what you want to do is consider who's actually in your social network, who's already there from your sector, your industry, your professional location. And then the next question is, who's not in your network? Who have you not reached out to? Who have you not reached out to who's not within your profession, not within your field of work? It's surprisingly how many people know each other, connections that I've made. There was one example where I had met someone who was I was actually in the position hiring someone in a marketing role. The person I was considering made it to my final list, but we didn't end up hiring. But however, that person years later actually introduced me to the founder of New Canadians. So you never know who these people are and who they actually know. So in terms of the types of events to attend, these are ones that we've talked about in terms of trade fairs and shows, industry conferences. It's a great way to actually find out what the topics of interest are within the field, by reading up, by doing your homework, understanding who the speakers are, following the speakers on LinkedIn, reaching out to them, liking some of their articles. I've been able to connect with some experts in cross-cultural marketing, experts in professional speakers who normally I would not have contacted with, but because I liked some of their articles, I made some comments around some articles that they had posted. In a lot of cases, just in terms of the timing, if you're one of the first people to actually like an article and comment on it, you may actually get the attention of someone who's a very important speaker in your field, where if you wait until other people comment, you may not be able to get their attention.
But Brent, the world is in a lockdown. How do you start networking? You can't go to these conferences.
No, you can't. But if I go through the list of the events, the trade fairs and shows, some of those have gone on online already. A number of the professional events have already gone to digital platforms. So they're using, a lot of them are using Zoom, a lot of them are using Hop-in. One thing that you can look at within your LinkedIn profile, you can choose how many groups that you follow. And I can tell you, there are exactly 99 groups that you can follow on LinkedIn. And the reason I know that there are 99 groups is because I follow 98 groups. And that is and I've been doing that for years. And the way that the algorithm works is by joining different groups across different industries. So I'm part of financial services and travel, tourism, the market research field. It automatically will make a connection for you and say, hey, Vashuda has joined the tourism field. She actually knows these people, and the system will actually make some connections for you. And because you actually have something in common, which is the group that you belong to. Networking is really all about finding areas that you have in common. And by using that functionality within LinkedIn, you've automatically opened a door and established some relationships that you wouldn't have had before.
Okay, let's quickly check the pulse of our audience. in terms of how the COVID pandemic has affected their networking efforts. Are you doing less networking? Are you networking more? Or is there no change in your behavior? How has the coronavirus pandemic impacted the amount of professional networking that you're doing? You're doing less, doing more, or no change? Punch in your answers now. In your many years of professional career, Brent, you may have seen, not of this scale, but you may have seen many market ups and downs. What were your personal, career maneuvers, or how did you change your tactics in those times?
Yeah, I've in the last 20 years, I've been through a number of these situations. So I was in the travel industry during 9/11. I was working in Toronto during SARS. I was in the financial services industry during the Great Recession. So fortunately, I've seen a lot of these up close and personal. Just giving you an example of in terms of networking. So back around 07, I know this is many years ago, but it is relevant. One of my staff members, Mark, who was a brilliant relationship builder, had told me about this new platform called LinkedIn, and he said, "Brent, you gotta get on this platform. It's great that you can build relationships." So took Mark's advice. I went on, and at the time in the financial services company I was working for, I started looking for people who I knew, because I knew a lot of people in Toronto, a lot of people in New York, London, Australia, other places the company operated. Couldn't find any of them. They weren't there. So I was like, "Mark, what's with this great system? Like, there's no one else I know." Then 2009 came. People started carrying boxes out of the Lehman Brothers office down at World Financial Center in Lower Manhattan. And within about 6 months, every single person, virtually it seemed, from my organization was on LinkedIn. So I would say that's just an example of where the technology that's been available, people have not necessarily been accessing it. And I think some of these platforms we talked in earlier about Zoom or Hopin, some of the virtual platforms, people are really going to start making use of them. Again, Twitter would be another example where people have said, "Well, I really don't have a lot of news to share, but this is the time. This is the time to any of these platforms available. Make sure that you're savvy with them, because we are going to see changed behavior both in workplaces and also consumer behavior when we get out of this together."
Okay. Our viewers have spoken. We asked them, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected their networking efforts? 63% of them say they're doing fewer networking, less networking. Only 13% say they're doing more. So I think these results kind of show give us a window into the mindset people have right now, that probably this is not the best time to network. And if they're wanting to change career paths or wanting to change a job, or are out of a job and looking for one, maybe networking wouldn't yield results. But as Brent says, that's not the case. There are so many online networking events being held. So Brent, why don't you share with us a list of do's and don'ts? You shared some practical tips. What should you avoid when networking?
Sure. So let me just think about some of the do's and don'ts. One of this is some advice that I've heard given quite a bit, and I may have a little different perspective on it. People will say, what you should do is come up with a list of those companies that you want to work for. They can make a short list. Pick 5, right? These are 5 companies you want to work for, and then start building relationships with those firms. If you look at the market in Ontario, where I'm based, or in a lot of places across Canada, a lot of the growth is actually coming from firms that most of us have never heard of before. The economy is about 95% small, medium-sized enterprises. Those brand name companies, those global organizations that are dominating, consumer behavior, the internet, there's a lot of people all over the world, in your city, your community. Everyone wants to work there. And what I would say is you kind of want to pick maybe a path of a little less resistance. And there are so many job opportunities. And I know that, in the last 2 weeks with the economy, that the changes that have hit us, but there's a lot of organizations, smaller companies that we haven't heard of, that can offer great, job opportunities, great career direction. They may not be the brand names that you know about or think about or read about all the time, but those are really where a lot of the opportunities are. And I would be just open your mind in terms of who you're working for, especially for people who are, moving in their career and looking to advance their career. Some of these small organizations might be your ticket for growth.
Okay. To all our viewers watching us right now, we're also live streaming on YouTube. You can punch in your questions. You can type in your questions on the Q&A tab on Zoom. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you can also type in your questions there, and Brent is here to answer all your queries. Now, Brent, now that you said also try to discover other sectors, other companies, lesser known companies that actually are doing bulk of the hiring right now, could you identify some sectors which are now seeing demand?
Sure. So again, this is not making any promises, in this area, but in the last 2 weeks, there's been a lot of growth in terms of grocery, in terms of distribution, in terms of delivery. I've seen numbers, 50,000, 100,000 employees being hired North America wide. So you're gonna have to put that in context for Canada. But some of the largest retailers in the world, some of the largest online retailers, some of the largest grocery store chains, delivery store chains, because we're all self-isolating. We're all having to stay at home, but we still need to eat. We still need food. There's things that we still need. So I'd worked in the e-commerce space for grocery back about 3 years ago, and we were predicting that there was going to be growth in terms of delivery and even pickup from different supermarket chains, very much like there has been in Europe for going on 5 years, but it hadn't really picked up in Canada, I'd say, until the last couple of weeks. Because now it's a necessity. People really need to have those deliveries. And if you look on the back end in terms of the supply chain, the distribution systems to actually make sure that the food gets to your door and ends up on your table, there are opportunities in those spaces. There's been some very good articles in the different business publications, the different online newspapers highlighting some of these opportunities. Again, there's been more negative news, bad news out there, but there definitely is some opportunity in some of those delivery supply chain distribution spaces, especially around food and grocery.
Right. And Brent, whether our viewers are networking over LinkedIn, reaching out to people over LinkedIn or through online events, as you pointed out, what kind of message should they be conveying? What kind of a personality or image should they be communicating in their interactions with industry professionals?
Oh, absolutely. Very good question. And this applies whether you're doing this virtually, like we're doing it tonight, or you're doing it in person. So you really want to go into any of these interactions with a positive, optimistic attitude. You're there really to have a sense of curiosity about other people, about their work. You want to do your homework and understand them, and you want to be there to actually give. Like, it amazes me that people will go to a networking event or online or offline and say, but I really don't have anything to offer. I'm more junior in my role. I'm just starting out. But I would say that for a lot of, especially for newcomers, you've got international business experience. You've worked in other markets. You've worked with different supply chains. You have experience which quite a few people who are established Canadians like myself may not have had, and that's actually a real attribute and an example of how you can work with other people. So that's something to bring to the forefront, and
That's
something
great.
that you can highlight.
Okay, we have a question coming in from Sugandha Grover. She wants to know, I'd like to know if the networking events, whether they are helpful for people who are thinking of changing their career in Canada, but have been away from school and university for quite a while. For example, careers in law are tough to understand.
Sure. So again, I think there's, if I go back to some of there's regulated professions, and again, I would refer you to New Canadians TV and the online website. There's a lot of information on PINs, which are again the professional immigrant networks. If you're looking at getting into a regulated profession, so a regulated profession would be a registered nurse, a physician, a lawyer, an accountant. I mean, there are standardized tests wherever you are in Canada that you need to go through. There is really not there's not an easy way to go into any of those regulated professions without going through the discipline in terms of going back to school, etc. There are, however, for people who have had experience in other markets, there's other ways to apply those. There's other ways that you can apply if you had a background, say, in journalism, and how you would actually apply that maybe potentially in communications in the Canadian market. If you have a background within accounting and understand the books, there's other ways that you might be able to apply it into other fields. So again, yes, networking absolutely is an opportunity. There are networking events specifically for people within fields and professions, but I would encourage you to go outside your comfort zone, reach outside your comfort zone and attend an event where you may not be able to make the direct connection to how this would advance your career. You might consider going to an entrepreneur's event. There's a lot of smaller digital meetups where people have their own business and might be able to benefit from your experience. There's a lot of online expos that are had where people are promoting their products and services. So those are a lot of different options that are available. But again, networking is one of the ways to open doors for you.
Yeah. Okay, so we're taking a live Q&A with Brent Edwards, professional networking advisor on Cafe New Canadians. Please send in your questions by typing on the live chat on YouTube where we are live streaming. You can also type in your questions on the Q&A tab on Zoom if you're watching us here on Zoom. Okay, our next question comes in from Anjali, Brent, and she wants to know, I'm looking for my first job in Canada. How do I network with people to get access into the hidden job market? Now, Brent, a lot of people may have just completed their courses and their graduation may have coincided with this time. What do they do now?
It reminds me a bit of what I had encountered. I guess I referenced a bit earlier where I had just graduated with a marketing degree. I knew that I wanted to end up working either for a major hotel firm or a major firm in the travel industry. That ended up happening for me, but in some ways I had to move halfway across the country and be flexible in terms of going into a sales career to move into marketing. So there are opportunities that are outside of some of the major cities. Some of the smaller communities are really active trying to encourage newcomers to come to build a career, build a family, and stay. It's kind of been a bit of a Canadian tradition where people have had to move around the country for work. If you look at the example with Newfoundland and Labrador before the offshore oil industry, a lot of people would make the flight out to Fort McMurray in northern Alberta to work in the oil sands. That's something I would consider. Again, it's your own personal situation, whether you're willing to move. You may have other commitments with family, but it's something you might want to consider at this time of your career. I would look into related areas in terms of your field. You may have a background, again, say in marketing, but a lot of those skills are transferable to sales or customer service. If you're in a particular sector which has taken a downturn, you'll know that that's not permanent, but I would look at potentially the supply chain of larger organizations where having an understanding of a particular sector by working with some of their suppliers who are critical components of having them deliver those products to market could come in handy and could be seen as you would bring some expertise to the area. I would also tap in if you were recently in school, whether you're at a university, a public college, a private career college, they all have resources available where they really want to help recent graduates be successful, because that's something they want to be able to advertise and attract new students. So make sure you're making use of all those resources. There's also the alumni of the former graduates from those programs. You can go on to LinkedIn, you can check where people graduated from. You can also see a feed where it will show people what school people went to. And those are some natural commonalities. Again, it all comes back to what do you have in common? If you went to the same school together, that's something that could open the door for you.
Very interestingly, in Anjali's question, she talks about this hidden job market. A lot of people talk about that challenge, not knowing when the jobs that really fit their skills, their work experience, they don't know when they get posted, because a lot of them get fulfilled internally. And this is where networking comes in, right? The hidden job market.
100%, 100%. And I would say that those jobs that are posted, whether it's on Indeed or Monster or any of the online platforms, the number of applications that I've seen that colleagues in the field see, if a job is posted online within a few days, if you count the number of people who are applying, and again, I'm talking about jobs in Canada, applying through LinkedIn, applying through Indeed, applying directly, talking about hundreds of applicants. And unless the company is using an automated tracking system, which they may, that's just way too many applicants for a company to be able to go through. So you really want to get kind of advance notice of some of the opportunities before they come up. So I'll give you a personal example where this worked for me. This is several years ago, I had been laid off from a previous job because of a downturn. Actually had reached out to a really good former colleague of mine who is amazing, and she had offered to look through her LinkedIn profile and offered to connect me with people. I went through a list of some of her connections, actually had a conversation about the events industry with the gentleman. We had a good conversation, about half an hour, and kind of left it at that. About a month and a half, 2 months later, I saw a job posting on LinkedIn. Guess who the hiring manager was? The gentleman I spoke to. I reached out to him. I said, remember our conversation? He said, oh, put your application in. And, went off the races, and that ended up in a role for me. So in this case, it wasn't a case of that I knew about the job before it was posted, but I did find out. Another one, the first job I had when I moved to Toronto, again, many years ago, but still applicable. I actually had an interview with the hiring manager a week before she actually posted the job. She posted the job. She hired people. I had gone back to Vancouver. This is 3 weeks later. She had gone through and interviewed everyone and came back to me and actually offered me the job. And that's one of the reasons why I was able to pack everything in my little car, drive to Toronto, and start a brand new life. And that was one where I'd found out about the job before it was even posted. But The way I found out was because I saw other postings for the same company for different roles, and the company had just done an acquisition. So I kind of put two and two together and said, hey, because they bought this other company, it's in the same field, maybe they're going to be hiring roles in sales and business development, even though they were only posting jobs in customer service. It turned out it was right. So that worked out for me.
Brent, we have another question coming in from Sue this time.
Sure.
She asks, how can we find opportunities for collaboration via networking events?
Opportunities for collaboration. Oh, there's all kinds of ways to collaborate. There's a lot of people that I'm now collaborating with in the area of cross-cultural training and my professional networking advising, who I met through networking events. I'll give you another example. There was a LinkedIn local event I went to. There was a question and answer period. A gentleman got up, very articulate, asked a great question about working with newcomers and networking. And I thought, I need to go and talk to this guy. So we talked over coffee, we met and had another coffee. Turns out we both have an interest. He's fairly new to the country, but brilliant guy, a lot of background in marketing and technology, but wants to help newcomers. Yeah, I've been here a little longer, but we share a common interest. And the way I was able to connect with him was through going to this LinkedIn local event. So whether people are asking in person or they're asking through chat, just like we're doing tonight, it's surprising the number of people you can find.
So how much is too much when you're networking or reaching out with somebody? You don't want to overkill and overwhelm the other person. How much do you share? Do you just send them your entire work portfolio? What do you say? How do you craft your message, whether verbal or through a text?
Yeah, but I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, you're building a relationship with someone, and yes, it's a professional relationship. But think about the other relationships that you've built. You're basically going incrementally in terms of asking for permission. You don't want to come on too strong. You don't want to, appear needy or desperate. But it's really taking step by step. So it could be, for example, you may have chatted with someone through the online event. You could go to their LinkedIn profile. You could begin by following them. That seems to be really accepted. By following them, they also may post something. They could show that you liked it. You can make a comment. You could then potentially connect on LinkedIn and maybe arrange for sharing some other information. There's all kinds of resources. You can share articles. You can introduce them to somebody that you know that might be able to assist. And I've done this with some of my some of the people I met through LinkedIn. There's one woman who is actually a specialist in cross-cultural communications between the United States and India. So we have some common interests. She's actually based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. But we began by initiating I made some comments about some of the things that she'd posted on LinkedIn. I made some comments. I sent her some information, introduced her to some people. We ended up having a phone call. And then she actually introduced me to somebody who was a former client of hers in India who had actually just arrived in Toronto. And that gentleman actually came to one of my in-person events. And then I was able to return the favor by having him come to introduce him through the TechTO organization I talked about. And he was able to join with her from Salt Lake City for this event in Toronto. So again, it was incremental. You're not there it's not a transaction. You're there to build a relationship, build some confidence, build some trust, and that's done very incrementally.
Yeah. I can see our audience is enjoying your excellent insights, and nothing like real life stories to actually inspire people, Brent. We have Shweta with a question. She wants to know, how do you make online networking events effective? Because in-person events, you're actually meeting people, it's easier to connect, but it's difficult to do it in an online networking event. Please advise.
Sure. So if I go back to a couple of the in-person events that I've attended, I attended this is with a gentleman out of Boston who is again an expert in networking. He has his own podcast and has had about 185 episodes on it. He's a TEDx speaker. He actually, again, I have never met him in person, but we connected through LinkedIn. He ran a virtual happy hour. So, invited everyone to bring their drink, and, I brought my Canada mug there. And he had about 50 people join from not just Massachusetts, but all over the US. And I think I was the Canadian representative. But he was using one of these online platforms. It was Zoom. And what he was actually able to do was break us into session rooms on topics. So we actually went in, we had about 50 people in the room. He then broke us up into groups of about 10 or 12, and we were able to actually have a more intimate conversation about, in this case, it was career development, where other people were talking about business development, or other people were talking about digital marketing. But there's so much capability that these platforms now have to not just be a stage. You can go into the platform and it will show, it's like, look here, there's the stage, there's the networking component, there's the breakout sessions, there's the expo. So I would not be put off by, it's like, oh, it's an online event, I'm going to connect with people. I've also seen examples with some of this technology where they will create a networking session. So you'll have, say, they'll say, we're going to have the next 6 minutes and you're going to meet 2 people. So they will actually put you into a network and they will run the system. The system will automatically do a match, and you will have someone come up and you've got 3 minutes to speak with them, and it will show on the screen. There's a timer, you'll get to talk. And because you have put the information into the system beforehand, you can click at the end that you want to connect with the person. And then it automatically will, shuffle the cards like in a deck of cards, and you get another person for another 3 minutes, and you've connected with them. Plus, you can even go in to the chat and identify people that you can send them individual messages. You can connect with individual people. So it's mind-blowing the options that are available now. So like, just don't miss out. You don't want to, don't have FOMO, don't have fear of missing out. Really give these a try, and you'd be shocked in terms of some of the relationships that you're able to build through the new platforms. Again, it's like, it's a terrible time, but take advantage. This is it. Carpe diem, seize the day.
On that note, it was a great hour of coffee and conversation with Brent Edwards, professional networking advisor. Thank you so much for those excellent insights. I'm sure our audience learned so much from your experience and your really practical strategic tips. Now, you can all follow us on social media. New Canadians is on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We post content catered to newcomers, helping them through their job seeking, their careers, life in Canada, and really meaningful content to help them settle in better in this wonderful country. Also subscribe to our monthly newsletter, which is a curated set of all our top stories, our best stories, exclusive interviews right into your inbox every month. And our best stories get aired on Omni Television and National News Channel. You can watch us on Omni. We're also on YouTube, and on the palm of your hand, and also on our website, newcanadians.tv. And like I said at the start of this session, we'll keep bringing you more conversations with experts and newcomers, Canadians who've made it big in Canada about their experience. Next week, we're going to bring to you Sukhjit Singh. He's a volunteering ambassador in Canada and an award-winning career strategist, and he's going to talk about volunteering while keeping your social distancing. As like networking is important, volunteering is equally important to find your feet in the job market in Canada. This webinar is going to get hosted again on Zoom and YouTube on Saturday, March 28th at 3:30 p.m. So do join in. And that brings me to a close of this session. Before all of you log off, a survey will pop up as you log off from Zoom. Please punch in your answers. Let us know how you liked today's session, what we can improve for the next session, what kind of topics you want to listen to, what kind of experts you want to listen to during this unprecedented time in humanity. Brent, do you have any closing parting, like a quick message for our viewers today?
Sure. Vasudha, thank you again so much to you and to the team at New Canadians TV. Really enjoyed participating and trying to make a difference. I would encourage people, if they do want to connect with me, my URL, it's www.networkingfornewcomers.ca. That's my website address. Also, I do have a LinkedIn group, which is dedicated to helping Canadians, people supporting new Canadians, called the Career Welcome Mat Network. I encourage you to join. I would say that if you go back to, there was a famous movie from the 90s called Jerry Maguire. One of the sayings there was, "Help me help you." If you can articulate to other people how they can assist you, they will reach out and they will help you. There's so much you can contribute to others' careers. And by showing that you really want to give and help others, it will come back and help you many times over.
Help me help you. You just have to show the right intent and the willingness to take that critical step forward. Brent, thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for showing us your support today. Thank you. Stay home, stay safe.